with his disciples, but it says in 9:30, they passed through Galilee, but he would not that any man should know it. Jesus was here and on Capernaum, and he was revealing the light to them, and he said, and they mocked him, and they basically said, we want more signs, they said in verse 11. They wanted more signs, tempting him. Are you really the Christ? And Jesus said, no. He says, there shall be no sign given unto you. You're hopeless. Or not, that's what he said, but it's almost like, this is it. I gave you all the light that you need, and you chose to reject it. And then verse 13 just simply says, and he left them. He just left. And I think this is more than just simply them getting on the boat and leaving, but I think it's more, I lost my, I think I have my PowerPoint off here a little bit. If it doesn't make sense, don't worry about it. Just listen to me. I'm not sure where that's going. Can't remember anymore. But I believe that that this is what happens when not only did he leave them physically, like in a physical sense, but I believe he abandoned them to the sense of what Romans 1 says. He abandoned them to their darkness and to their unbelief. Romans 1 gives if you remember Romans 1, it just gives what I call the spiral to darkness, of being unthankful, ungrateful, and it just spirals down until they're given over to reprobate minds. Jesus is saying, you know what? Choice, and I'm leaving. But the question then is, who is going to follow Jesus? And we have here the 12 disciples. It says, he entered into the ship and departed to the sides, and in verse 14, evidently the disciples had gone with him. There's one thing that we understand about a hardened heart, and this could be a message in itself as well, but a heart only for religious people. And I say that because a heart cannot harden itself against the truth. Does that make sense? If a truly ignorant person cannot harden his heart against the truth because the truth has not been revealed. So, and only to harden oneself against the truth, one first and foremost has to be exposed to the truth. So only a knowing heart can harden itself. It means you and I. That was the Jewish leaders, the Pharisees. It was the disciples, you and I. But hardened heart is a problem and typically that's religious people or people that were in religion. And I think that's one of the greatest dangers here of heart hardening. And I want to look at, now I got to make sure, I'm not sure where I had this on PowerPoint somewhere. I'd have to I'm behind, that's what it is. I want to look at 3 features, just briefly, of those who reject the light. Verses 11 and 13. First one is, they're comfortable with others in darkness even though they're enemies. If we look through the Pharisees and the Sadducees, they did not get along with each other. In fact, they were enemies of each other. The Pharisees couldn't stand the Sadducees. They were enemies and constantly enemies, but in this case, they both were comfortable with each other because they were against Christ, against the Messiah, against Jesus. The second thing that we see, and for those that reject light, is they are then consigned to greater darkness. So when Jesus first came and he revealed the truth to the people, to everyone, religious people, the heathen, everyone made a decision, and the Jewish leaders, unfortunately, decided to reject Jesus, and they are consigned to even greater darkness. They kept going, spiraling to greater darkness. And the third one, they are then condemned to permanent darkness. Jesus leaves. And we're going to come back later and look at 3 features of those who accept the light later. But as I look at these 3, I want to just go on to the next step. Temporary blindness in verses 14 through 21. It's interesting to me that as Jesus left Capernaum, and it says he got into the boat and went to the other side, the disciples went with him. So think about light. If we turn light on in a building when it's total darkness, when you turn the light off, the light leaves. And typically, mankind leaves with that because we don't like to be in darkness, except spiritually, that's not the case. Mankind, and so where there's darkness, they follow that. But we have to make an effort, a concerted effort to follow the light. We have to move from darkness into light, and that's what the disciples did. As the Lord left, as the light left the boat, his followers followed him. And it simply gives me, I think of the fact that this is a point where there had to be a decision made. Jesus came into the other side of the Sea of Galilee, and there were thousands of people there again listening to him, and the disciples weren't with him. But I'm going to look at the disciples' response in verses 14 and 15, 16, and just a little bit here. It seems to me, and I'm being critical of the disciples, I know that, and I know I've been in their shoes many times. But it seems to me that if I'd have been in disciples' shoes, and I probably wouldn't have been, but feeding thousands of people with just a few loaves of bread and fishes. I just came through seeing Jesus heal miraculously many people. And now as we get into the boat with Jesus, he's leaving and we're going over, I would have said, wow. You know, why wasn't their response, Lord, what does this all mean? But you know, look at 14. Look what they thought, we forgot to take any bread. We got to eat. Isn't it amazing to you? I thought it was very ironic that they had just come through the miracle of multiplying loaves and fishes, and maybe a day before, I'm not sure how much time elapsed here, probably a day, and their minds went immediately, what are we going to eat next? Isn't that so human? But it seems that they forgot to take bread and they only had one loaf. They were thinking about lunch. So whatever light that they had been revealed to, whatever light they had seen, it was a very dim light. But at least it was a light. At least they were following the light. And that's another step, you know, when you follow the light, that has to be a choice you and I have to make, is follow the light. We have to make a choice to allow that light to shine. And then we become comfortable with that light, and as we become comfortable with that light, God then leads us on to greater light. So point one, if you're in the light, then you're probably more than comfortable. Remember, the first step of those that reject darkness, people that accept Jesus are comfortable with the light. They're comfortable being with Jesus. And the disciples were comfortable with Jesus. They were in the boat with him. They were going to the other side with him. That's why they got in the boat. That's why they followed Jesus. It's why they did what they did. They were comfortable. And so as that was step, comfortable with that, following the light, then you will have more and more light. It gives me, it's exactly what I've preached before and I've said many times already. God reveals more to those that willingly accept him and obey what they already know. And so many times we want greater revelations, or we want greater light, we want greater, Lord, show us more, but we're not willing to step out in obedience of doing what we already know, what God has commanded us to do. And I always ask, well, how do you expect God to reveal more? And I think this is what this is. It's simply the Pharisees, the Jewish leaders, had made the choice that they were not going to believe, but yet they wanted more signs. And Jesus says, no, you don't even believe the sign in front of you. How can I going to reveal? And he left. But the disciples, the followers, followed Jesus in the light, even though it was a dim light, even though they were pretty ignorant, and even though they didn't understand many things, even though their bellies were growling and they wanted bread when Jesus was trying to teach them spiritual things, they were following the light. And as they followed the light, Jesus then revealed more light, as we can see further on. And it's so true, it's so promising, it's so much what happens. And I think of this many times with newborn Christians, whether they're young people or whether they're older people. Newly born Christians, they're just as saved as they're just as saved. The person that just accepted Jesus Christ last night is just as saved as the 80-year-old man or woman that's sitting in here has been saved for 50 years. Is their spiritual enlightenment, or what should I say? I'm not sure of the word. Their spiritual understanding as clear? Probably not, right? No. That's the beauty of getting old. For some of us, it takes a little longer, but that's the beauty of age. There's more understanding. But they're not more saved. There's just been further more light been revealed. And we have more light as we keep going. Notice in verse 15, Jesus gives a warning. He says, take heed, and then he says, beware. And this whole verse here could be a message in itself. I almost did, but decided not to. It's not where I was going. Of the Pharisees and of the leaven of Herod. There, in Matthew, the parallel passage in Matthew doesn't say Herod, it says the leaven of the Sadducees. And so I'm going to break it up into three different leavens, briefly touch about it. Jesus very, very specifically repeats himself, take heed, beware, a double warning, basically saying, young men, young Christians, beware, take heed. And he's giving are very much influential in not only in newborn Christians, all Christians, but especially in newborn believers. And one is the leaven of the Pharisees. The Pharisees were legalists, people of great influence, the letter of the law. Do everything exactly how I say. And that is one temptation that we sometimes fall into, and especially newborn Christians, is falling into legalism, following the letter of the law. The other one is the Sadducees, and they are the leaven of liberalism. And when I talk about liberalism, I'm not talking about how we typically... Liberalism simply, allow me to do what I want to do, and I will allow you to do what you want to do. That is spiritual liberalism. It's simply, I will believe what I believe, you believe what you believe, and let's just go on with life. It's simply accepting all doctrines, accepting everything. That's the Sadducees. And then the leaven of the Herodians was secularism, which is simply no spirituality. It's more politics, it's more government, it's more being involved in let's go ahead and stand for a little bit. Just stretch and stand up a little bit. So we see there's three things that Jesus was telling them to beware of, watch out for these. I'm warning you, he's telling his disciples, I'm warning you, be aware of the Pharisees among you. The temptation to do, every religion has the temptation to fall into legalism. And Christianity is one of those. There is a temptation to go into legalism. There's also the temptation of going into liberalism, as defined. And it's also the temptation of going into secularism. And we see that in society around us, all over the place. We see the legal aspect of Christianity. We see the liberal aspect of Christianity. And we see the secular aspect of Christianity. Oh, it's all good. It's all done in the name of Christ, but we're going to... Where's the kingdom of God in all this? What truly is the kingdom of God? You may be seated. And again, like I said, this could be a whole message in itself. But basically, Jesus was telling these new followers that had a little bit of light shown to them, he was telling them, beware of this. And you're thinking of bread? Isn't that ironic? Substance his. Some teachings here to have them beware what's keen. They start to reason among themselves. What is he talking about? Is it because we have no bread? They still weren't getting it, were they? What is he talking about? And it just made me think, they heard the word leaven, and what did it make them think of? Bread. That reminds me, I'm standing between you and lunch. I'm not talking about food here. All you're thinking about is lunch? No, I hope not. But see, this is where their mind was at. It was so we would say unspiritual, so human thinking. If but I'm saying you would have thought that after Jesus said that about the leaven of the Pharisees, the leaven of the Herod, they would say, hey,